Garskoff, Ruth Smay, Carol Way, Jay Wolk, Matt Ambrose, Hannah Gale, Ray Newberger, Janice Solomon, Tom McCarthy, Mark McDermott, Jill Vergara,
Here.
Karen Wackerman,
Here.
Hank Ferentz, Pamela Iacono, Christine Messina, Peter Tallman, Brian Farnan, Drew Georgiadis,
Here.
Ken Lee,
Here.
Bill Perugini,
Here.
Sam Cargill, Paul Fattabine, Michael Hurley, Eric Sunman.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. We're here to consider proposed appropriations for the fiscal year of July 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2017 as recommended by the Board of Finance for any lawful purpose and the amount to be determined by the Board of Finance. May I have a motion to discuss? Moved by Representative Ambrose, seconded by Representative McDermott. Thank you. The first item up is the summary budget presentation by the First Selectman. You all received an electronic version of the slideshow that you can follow along with. Mr. Tetro is going to give us a brief update on where we are and a synopsis, and if we have any questions, we can go from there. Thank you. You're welcome, sir. Finance is down here, Gerber. It's not plugged in at the bottom. Is it supposed to be plugged in at the bottom? On and on. No.
Nope.
Is it supposed to be plugged in?
No, it's a wireless mic.
All right, how about now? All right, Madam Chair, thank you for a chance to stand up here and kind of set the framework for the budget. It's been through the budget's been through the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance at this point. There have been a few tweaks in it, so I'm going to go through and lay some of the foundation items and do that as briefly as I can so that we can move on to the actual budget discussions, if that's okay with you, Madam Chair. The budget objectives this year were to manage our expenses and still provide high-quality services to our residents, to fund all our essential services, to fund our long-term obligations from pension, OPEB, surplus to senior tax relief, to provide the support and funding for our top-quality school system, and continue to strengthen our financial foundation. The town-side budget recommendation was originally proposed for just over $129 million, and that was a decrease on the town side of 0.22%. Those numbers have changed a bit. The town side is now a decrease of 0.12% after coming from the Board of Finance. This is the first town side decrease in 20 years. The town budget includes the annual recommended pension contribution, annual recommended OPEB contribution, an increase in funding for paving, an increase in public works equipment funding, an increase in snow clearing expense, though obviously we didn't need much of that this year. We're still planning for a winter next year. An increase in senior center support. The town budget also includes continued funding for sidewalk maintenance. This was just started 2 years ago. Continued funding for the supplemental contribution to surplus to protect our AAA rating. Continued funding for senior and disabled tax relief at higher than last year's actuals. The budget is the same as last year. The actuals are slightly lower, but we funded it at the budget amount to allow for an increase in senior tax relief. And continued funding for our school security measures. The Board of Ed requested $165 million, representing a 2.59% increase. My recommendation was slightly smaller, at a 2.14. That's also been adjusted again based on the Board of Selectmen votes and the Board of Finance votes the other night. There are additional school costs that are carried on the town side that come in at just over $25 million. When you add those in, the Board of Ed request is just over $190 million. That represents 64.5% of our overall budget, and it continues our strong commitment to public education. Some highlights: we have several significant adjustments. The town was looking at joining the state premium-based health care program. At the Board of Selectmen, we adjusted that, and the reduction in the health insurance is actually not the $700,000 that was originally included, but is a reduction of $500,000 and change over last year's health insurance cost, based on better experience since January in our health care program and some additional negotiating we did with Anthem to lower our fees on that side. So even though it's a reduction, it basically assumes we're staying in the current self-insurance program. Workers' comp expenses were down by about $70,000. We continue to benefit from our additional training and our safety committees that are set up within Town Hall. On the capital replacement side, costs are up due to DPW equipment. Again, we're moving more of those to the budget and not bonding those. We're in the third year of our 4-year transition plan. Paving has increased by $210,000, and all paving expense is now in the budget. And our OPEB costs are estimated at an increase of $386,000. We have a couple of personnel adjustments. This budget includes funding for a part-time receptionist at the senior center. This is due to our membership that when I wrote this was at 2,500. Last week it was up to 2,700 members. That's up from 400 just 4 years ago. In public works operations, we've eliminated 2 full-time positions. And on the Smith-Richardson Golf Course, we've also eliminated 2 full-time positions. So the combined town and Board of Ed budget that was recommended was just over $294 million. It is just over 293 currently in the budget before you, based on the adjustments made at the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. This recommendation would require a tax levy of $277 million. That is down to just under $276 million, and this is an increase. It was an increase of 1.19%. The combined budgets are now going up 0.79% in the proposed recommendation before you. This includes in the presentation, when you take a look at it, there are a couple graphs showing a 5-year history. You can see the trend on the town side has declined from 2013 down to the negative this year. The Board of Ed budget trend has been up and down a bit. When you combine them together, there's a chart that shows that the 5-year trend is basically in decline for the most recent 5-year periods. And then the other chart that's interesting is that I pulled out a study from a third party that compared spending per capita throughout all the towns in Connecticut, but I included a number of those in Fairfield County that we often hear people comparing us to. That's on one page here, and you can see that Fairfield's spending per capita at just over $4,500 is one of the lowest in Fairfield County for the towns that we compare ourselves to. And also it shows an increase over period from 96 through 2012, and it shows how each of the towns their spending has increased over that time period, and Fairfield is the second lowest in that category in terms of that trend. So that's one of the questions or comparisons or comments that are made around town a lot, and I thought it was helpful to have these. For those of you familiar with different, call them stat groups or think tanks. These numbers are from the Yankee Institute, so that that should provide some credibility on that side. They're not known for their, they are known for their conservative approach on financials in this case. And with that, that's a quick update on the budget, and hopefully position some of that as you review the numbers. You can see what we've been trying to do and what some of the impacts are.
Thank you. Thank you. Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for the first selectman at this time? Mike, I'm assuming you'll be here for the evening in case something comes up.
Yes, I am recording the UConn women's game, so I do not have to leave.
Thank you. We'll be asking for
I
periodic.
do have a special request. If anybody's monitoring the game, I don't want to hear any score updates.
Before we get on to the next item, I just, an administrative thing. There's a, if anybody needs internet access, there's a sheet on the table that tells you how to log on. So if you need that, please check it out. Tonight we're going to run through OPEB, pension, legal services, internal service fund, HR administration, unemployment compensation, active employee benefits, contingency, town clerk, fair TV, register of voters, zoning board of appeals, town planning and zoning, conservation, community and economic development, purchasing, administrative services, finance, the fund balance, assessor, debt service, tax collector, and information technology. Sound good? Mr. Mayor. Is Mr. Mayor present? Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Bob? Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Could you please run us through the retiree section of the budget? Oh, 1310 OPEB and 1310 pension.
The
Yeah, hold on. What page in the book, Bob?
314.
Page 314.
These expenses are pretty much formula driven based upon the contracted medical and retirement benefits that the town employees, current and retired, have earned or are earning. The numbers are calculated based upon the actual evaluation using a discount rate of 7.5%. The numbers in the budget are exactly equal to the recommended amounts provided by the actuary. That covers both the two OPEB lines and the two retirement lines, 52310, 52311. The retirement line 52312 and the long-term disability line 52313 are based upon current employees, current salaries, and the CBAs related to those current employees. And the life insurance is calculated the same way. So these are really basically, the life insurance is calculated based upon the actual premiums. It's not an actuarial calculation. I'm sorry. So these are basically calculated numbers, 100% funded, based upon the actuarial required contribution.
Does anybody have any questions? Representative McCarthy.
Hey, Bob, I just have one comment. It would be helpful if we had a per unit cost and understood the number of employees, because as a reference point, it seemed to, spiked up in 2015 and coming back down. I'm not quite sure that, I think I'd fully understand it if I knew the number of employees.
The fluctuation for this, well, the fluctuations are based upon the actual returns versus the measured returns. The budget for 17 assumes a 0% return on our investments in the current fiscal year. In other words, you have for the determination of the long-term liability, you use a discount rate into the future. Our discount rate, based upon what the retirement board has determined, is 7.5%, which is right around the median in the state of the AAA-rated towns. But when we can calculate it for the next year, we know what happened last year. So last year wasn't 7%. Last year was 9.15% or something. This year we don't know, but we made an estimate, because when we do this valuation at the end of the calendar year 2016, we're looking, and the market was down about 4.5% actually. Since then, it's recovered by about 6 to 7%, so we're a couple of points ahead. But rather than using the 7.5%, we put in 0% for this year's return.
I got that. I can figure out the net present value of cash flows. What I was talking about, just from a reference point of per unit cost, should I assume that the number of employees are constant?
Well, no, the number of employees are the ones that are retired today,
Right.
Plus the projected retirees going forward.
Right, but year by year, it's based on an assumption based on number of employees, or an actual.
Year by year, it's based upon assumptions of the current people on retirement, the current life expectancies of each of those individuals, the current people employed, the anticipated percentage of those people that will stay employed through retirement, and their life expectancies.
Right, so my comment is it would be helpful to have that number per year, just as a benchmark that I could get a sense of per unit cost, how that runs up and down, because I see the bottom line going up, but I don't know if the per unit cost is going up. It help us understand a little bit better is my only comment.
Oh, you mean the unit cost? Well, I think a way to look at it what you might be looking for is like the percent of payroll cost.
The number of people fluctuates month to month or day to day.
I mean, I'm happy to provide you whatever you want. Maybe we can talk about it offline.
Yeah, let's talk about it offline.
Yeah.
Representative Bateson.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob. Bob, who does this calculation?
Hooker and Holcomb is the firm.
Hooker and Holcomb. Now, I know when it comes to health insurance, we track that on a monthly basis. If there's any material change in the asset base here, would that drive a change in this, or we don't track this on a monthly basis? Once this valuation's done or the contribution is calculated, that's it, we're committed to it, they don't revisit this on a monthly basis?
That's a correct statement. The retirement, retirement valuation, the pension valuation is calculated annually, the OPEB every 2 years.
Okay. And that's it. We've never, in the past, this is a consistent application
of that
process. We never revisit to tweak the number going into budget.
Correct. The retirement numbers are numbers, that is correct. Yeah. It would be unusual to do that, yes.
Representative Gerber.
Hey, Bob. Okay. Bob, the 0% return, is that something you consistently do every year, or just decided to do it this year for the assumption?
Well, we don't want to understate the liability or under expense. So it was a valid, rational thing that you do when you're off 7.5 points. You know, it's the right thing to do. It's the usual thing to do. It's the proper thing to do.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you have a policy on how you determine.
I think the actuaries have a policy to make the best calculation with the best information and latest information.
So it was the actuaries who.
Yeah, we discussed it, right? Yes. Yeah, it's not something I just made up.
Okay. All right.
Anyone else? Excellent, thank you. You'll be back, I'm sure. Do you want to stay there? We're going to go to legal services, and then we're going to hop into more of your stuff, I think.
Well, let Mr. Stanton come join me then.
All right. Mr. Lesser, legal services?
Good evening, all.
Good evening, Attorney Lesser.
Okay, so my budget, I think, is number 1270, and I think it's on page 110. Best I can. My fiscal 16 budget was 450. We requested 600,000 for this coming fiscal year. The difference is that we're going to be starting to get tax appeals, and we added money to cover those. It's my understanding my budget was cut prior to tonight by $50,000. So.
Any questions for Attorney Lesser on legal services? Representative Bateson.
I'm sorry, Mr. Lesser, you're budgeting now for anticipated assessment issues.
Tax appeals, yes.
Tax appeals, okay. I'm sorry, the last time we went through an assessment, were you involved? Was that, we went through the
I came on
handoff thing,
board,
didn't we?
I think the year after, or I wasn't involved in the budgeting process for the initial reval in 2010, no.
Okay, so it looks like we have a bump in here of $150,000 and not now. Now it's 100,000 because 50 was cut, right? So $100,000.
Yes.
That seems to be above and beyond, so you're saying, can I assume that 100,000 is set aside for tax appeals in this budget?
Yes, it was originally 150. We figured that's what we would be needing this year.
Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, this process stretches out over 2 years, so should I expect another 100 next year? Because don't these carry on for a couple of years in the courts?
Yeah, so I think we still have a couple pending from the 2010 reval, but just a couple.
Okay, so
but they definitely do carry on for 2-3 years, yes.
Okay, so this isn't front-loaded, this isn't everything.
Absolutely not.
Okay, so we're going to see another 100 next year. It's not like we built it all in this budget. We're spreading it out.
We'll know a little better next year because they all have to be filed within the next couple of months. So we'll know how many we have this year. And you do get a couple. When you appeal this year, any change that's made is good for 5 years. So each year going forward, it's only good for 4 years, then 3 years, then 2. So it becomes less cost effective to take an appeal because you're only saving money for those years. So the number does dwindle. We're going to get the lion's share of them this year.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on legal services? I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Dean, I'm sorry. It's hard to see.
Good evening, Mr. Lesser. My question is, you're expecting most of the appeals to come through, the lion's share of the appeals to come through this year?
That's typically what we see, yes.
If it comes out to be more, to cost us more, how do we pay that bill? So if more come through...
You mean if I go over budget for this year?
Yeah, if we go over budget.
No, you have to ask Mr. Mayor.
All right. And if we...
He'll figure it out.
So it would be the same thing if we were to come under, would that money go to next year's budget?
No, I don't think it's carried over. No, I think it just goes into surplus. But again, Mr. Mayor would be better to answer that question.
once the budget's approved, this line item is like any other line item in the budget. If it snows more than we plan next year, we will be over in snow clearing, and we'll have to make that up from other places in the budget, including contingency. If we are hit with more slip and falls than we have in the budget, then we'll be over in that line in the budget, and we'll have to make that up from other areas of the budget, including contingency.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Farnan. Please grab a microphone. Thank you, Representative Vergara.
Brian Farnan, District 9. What cost-saving measures, if any, have been taken for fixed fee arrangements? Are the fees that are included in this primarily based on hourly billing rates, or what other kind of cost methods have been used?
Our fees are virtually all hourly, and they're substantially discounted from the lawyers' normal rates.
Would you ever consider fixed rates for certain types of more cookie-cutter type legal actions that are handled through the town?
I wouldn't say we wouldn't consider it.
Okay. All right, just for the future, just trying to understand it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Attorney Lesser, I'm just curious, is it possible for us to get a breakout by category? Do you categorize, your billing detail? How much do we spend on,
I can tell you what we budgeted.
appeal? I'd love to see budget to actual on that, and if we have any past history. I'm concerned about the amount of money that we're funding in legal, not for the lack of money we're funding in legal. I'm actually concerned that we're underfunding this account. My Republican counterparts probably won't like me for asking that question, but I'm a little concerned about handling some of the appeals, about some of the slip and falls, defending some of the zoning issues we have with 830G, and if we have the appropriate funds to cover all of those things. So I'm wondering if you could provide a breakout of that over maybe the past 3 years and see where we are budget
Sure.
to actual, just to
Could do
get a
that.
better understanding if this is where we need to be.
Could do that for you. Yep.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Okay.
We do have a breakout of what we've asked for in this year's budget, if you want to know that.
Yeah,
How the 600
I'd like to see budget to actual.
Okay.
I think we may have showed some of that in the past, but I think we can certainly show you what we spent.
All right, yeah, if you could go back 3 to 5 years, that'd be
Yeah,
fantastic.
I think we have a format that we shared in the past, so I think that should be pretty straightforward.
Okay, thank you very much.
Of course, as the lawyers will tell you, it's sometimes hard to predict some of these things, but
No, I fully understand. I just want to make sure we're budget to actual. Thank you. Anybody else? Great, thank you.
thank you all.
Thank you very much for your time. Next up, 1330 Internal Service Fund Active Medical Risk Management. 1330 Human Resources Administration. Mr. Mayor, are you handling both of these items? And Attorney Kennelly, thank you for joining us.
I'm sorry, where are we starting?
1330 Internal Service Fund Active Medical Risk Management.
Page,
Okay, there are three
Page
components.
117.
Oh, okay.
Starts Human Resources.
Oh. I just want to go through.
Right.
Right. Okay. So you want to go through the human resources piece first, or you want to?
The Internal Service Fund, please.
Just turn service piece. Okay. Service fund is comprised of 3 items. It's the workers' comp, it's the town health insurance, and it's, as you were just discussing with the attorney, legal reserves. The workers' comp information is on page 336 and 337, I think.
Pages 336 and 337. Thank you.
So looking at page 337, you have what's provided by PMA. Again, PMA is the third-party administrator for our workers' comp claims. They manage the claims, manage the payments, do the evaluations for the claims. So you see their number for the total estimated claims cost. The fourth number down is $2,138,000. And you go up to page 3, up at the top of the page, or not the, excuse me, the previous page, 336, you see that is the last number under fiscal year 17 total. And that's broken out between two numbers, the general fund, $2,062,375, and WPCA, $75,625. The breakout between those two is purely based upon numbers of employees. It's not based upon actual experience or current experience. It's just totally number of employees. So this, and you can see, looking back at page 337, that the heart and hypertension is also an account that they monitor and evaluate and give us a reserve amount on, not a reserve amount, but an estimated cost amount. So these are the numbers. So the numbers in the budget are 100% the numbers recommended by the third-party administrator. And then the claim services, I guess, are in your budget, right? Yeah. Right. But they're not in they're in your budget, not in your.
These items are in the HR budget, and as far as workers' comp is concerned, and heart and hypertension, I administer them for the town, and PMA does the actual day-to-day work. So if you have any questions in those areas, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Mr. Mayor is very familiar with the financial side of it.
Representative Bateson.
Thank you. Quick question on, I see the spreadsheet, the activity we have going through for risk management. And I see two numbers, general liability claims 500,000 and town property claims 100,000. What's the difference between those and how do we build that number?
Well, as far,
I assume that comes from your department, that's not an outsourced number.
Yes, but we do have to make some assumptions based on past experience and all. But as far as the, I'm sorry, you're not talking about the liability insurance line, you're talking about the claims line, correct? Okay. Our property claims tend to be items where it includes things like damage to cars, damage to fire trucks. Sometimes it's damage to someone's property as a result of an accident. There are a number of things that fall under that, but they tend not to add up to a huge amount. The other claims, the liability claims, are where someone sues us for something on tort grounds, and so we have to defend that. And I think possibly, Ms. Iacona, that's the legal budget does not absorb all the legal fee costs. Some of them are in here as well. And all of the costs for settlement or judgments are in this budget, not in the legal budget.
So if the Board of Selectmen authorized a settlement on a case, it would come out of this 500,000?
Correct. Assuming it was a liability case, yes.
Okay. Now, perhaps to Mr. Mayor, would I see a line similar to this on the BOE side? Because this just says risk management. Do you manage the risk for the BOE?
We pay everything.
So this is consolidated, this is BOE and town?
Correct.
And this 500 and 100, is this similar to what we have in the 16 budget?
I I'm sorry, I don't have that number in
All
front
right,
of me at the
if you
moment,
could just
unless you
look
mean
at,
something in
like-
the book.
Yeah, I don't have my 16 in front of me. If you could just see what we had in the 16 budget and see how we are, if we have a munis or,
Right now, we're within budget numbers certainly at the moment. But,
in this current budget?
yes, I believe so. I can certainly go back and double check that though. Property, I'm sure we're within the limits. I think on the liability side we are as well.
Okay, from what you just said, it sounds like this is a new accrual. I just want to, you're saying there's nothing in the current budget similar to this?
No, I'm not saying that.
Oh,
I'm
that's-
sure there is. I'm
Okay,
just
that's
saying
what I
I don't have it
heard.
in front of me, that's all.
Okay, all right, if you could just get that number and forward it to the moderator.
Certainly.
For what's in the current budget, and maybe a munis year-to-date on what's come out of it.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
Other questions? Representative Georgitis.
Madam Moderator, can you make sure everybody, can you request that everybody tells exactly what page they're on and so we can follow? Thank you.
You did hear that we're on page 336 and 337.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I was wondering, Representative Bateson was using some numbers I couldn't locate. Are you on a separate sheet? I don't know where. Oh, okay.
It's from one of the budget handouts.
Okay.
Supporting document with your
Supporting
backup
document.
material.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Seeing none. Human Resources Administration. $1330, I'm assuming that's page 117, 118, 119, am I correct?
I'm sorry, was there, yes, this is correct.
Okay.
Yes. Would you like to hear about it, or did you want to ask?
Yes,
questions?
can you give us an update where you are, what's going on with the department? I know
Sure.
you're currently in search of a director.
Well, actually, I think Mr. Mayor could more accurately report on where we are on the director, if he wishes.
But budget-wise, if you want to give us an update, that'd be great.
But the remainder of us, the benefits manager, our human resources administrative assistant, and our part-time secretary and myself are the other personnel in the department. We are succeeding in keeping things on track, I think, even without the help of a director, although Mr. Mayor helps us with a lot of things as well. We certainly look forward to having someone else because it is a little short-staffed right now. But I think money-wise, I believe everything is on track right now with regard to personnel.
Anybody have any questions on the HR department? Mr. Mayor, are you able to give us any type of update at this particular point on when you think you'll be hiring somebody?
The target is certainly to have someone by July 1. We have advertised, we have interviewed, we're in process. We have it down to, at this point, probably 4 candidates, and that we'll be having further discussions with and issuing an offer.
Great. Were we able to achieve any salary savings in the fact that we have a vacancy right now?
No.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, 3150 unemployment compensation. Is this in the 300s?
What page is that on? Does anybody know? Linda knows all the pages. I don't know all the pages.
204. Thank you.
Thank you, whoever said that. The methodology to determine the budget for unemployment compensation is a combination of reviewing current, people who are currently collecting unemployment and the duration of their benefits, combined with discussions with the Board of Ed, because this is both Board of Ed and Townside, so that we have discussions with the Board of Ed if there's any plans or any changes going on with the Board of Ed that might have an impact on future beneficiaries for this line item. And so it's a combination of historical and expected, and then a management judgment.
Anyone have any questions on unemployment compensation? Representative McCarthy.
Bob, does this include seasonal employment?
I'm sorry?
Does this include seasonal employment? In other words, there was, for a number of years, with the...
Yeah, there's certain seasonal employees that have, seasonal employees on the Board of Ed side who are guaranteed employment the next year do not qualify for unemployment, but non-Board of Ed people qualify, and it includes them.
Right, so they're hired seasonally, and in the off-season they collect unemployment.
Correct.
Okay. I don't know, it seems to me that represents, in some level, an abuse of unemployment. I know we've talked about this before. I'm just, it's probably worth discussing.
I mean, it's certainly not an issue for my office, and we follow state statute.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Bateson.
Representative Bateson.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Moderator. I want to make sure I didn't miss a conversation. Did we talk about medical yet? No. Okay, thanks. No, we just jumped in the unemployment. I didn't know.
No, we're about to get to active employee benefits.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
All right, next up, 1320 active employee benefits. Yes.
You know, I had that
AKA
page, and I lost it. Hold on a second. Back to page 116, I think.
Starts on 114 with the summary.
All right, I'm sorry, 114, 115. I was close. Okay, active employee benefits is broken out this year in as its own department. It's more consistent with GAFA reporting universally. So it's a bit of an improvement to our annual reports. This year we've been through a couple of iterations of this number. Started out with way back when to speak with Aon about the advantages of 2.0, and Aon spoke with the Board of Ed, and the Board of Ed spoke with their unions. 2.0, does everybody know, or does anybody want a background on what 2.0 is?
Is everybody familiar with the Connecticut State Plan at this point?
Yes.
We're good.
Okay. So the Board of Ed, the unions have gone into 2.0, and however, on the town side, there's some hesitancy to do so, which came as a little bit of a surprise, if not a big surprise to the administration, because it's a good plan. It does have some health enhancement programs that require some mandatory visitation to the physicians by the members to avoid a penalty. So we initially budgeted, however, as though everyone's going to state 2.0, and as of right now, the unions are not going, and we're still in discussions, and there may be a movement during the next budget year, because we do have 4 of these 7 union contracts up for discussion, actually, which we hope to come to closure on probably by September of 2017. So that might have some impact on what happens toward the second half of the budget year, but it's hard to say at this time. So the Board of the Board of Selectmen, and then confirmed by the Board of Finance, adjusted the number to the cost based upon the Aon experience rate. Well, the difference was $470,000 in total between the general fund and the WPCA increase in the initial budget.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that number? What was the amount they had to increase in the budget?
$470,170 combined.
Thank you. Questions on this item? Representative Ambrose.
What town side employee unions have elected not to join with this?
The police and fire actively determined not to, and that led to some hesitancy in the remaining 5 unions. The other 5 unions have not rejected it, but there's enough questions that have been raised that they're just certainly not ready to go at this point.
The concern is that we're without a human resources director at the present time to assist in facilitating a response to the problem.
We're without a human resources, but we have not been incapable of dealing with it fully and comprehensively with union meetings, information, discourse, the whole bit. It's been well handled and is both by myself, the Aon people, and an attorney, HR person that we are using to help us.
Other questions on this item? Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Bob, quick thing. I know at the selectmen and finance level, there was a lot of adjustments made to medical. Specifically, at the last iteration, it was BOE. In a number that I heard was around the BOE, the concern was when finance added back number that when we ran it out to June 2017, we came out to like $93,000 on the BOE. This is active medical.
Yeah, the active, well, that's active medical on the Board of Ed side,
right,
which is in the Board of Ed budget, but I'm certainly happy to talk about that. There is some complexity when you go from self-insured to fully insured. It comes out of the internal service fund and it goes into the operating fund. So that was one issue, how to account for that and how to deal with that, and where to leave the money, whether to leave it in internal service fund or leave it in the Board of Ed. So that was one. Second thing is what the runout was, which needed to be evaluated because the budget this year pays for both the full year of insurance plus the normal IBNR. And then the third issue was we kept having monthly updates on the experience. So that led to multiple conversations and discussions.
Okay. Now, I heard the concern that in June 2017 with that $93,000 in the BOE, that was one of the reasons it went up. If we ran out the town side, what would that number be in June 2017?
Well, the run out for the BOA is $1,900,000 well, before the last month's adjustment, it was $1,980,000. I think it's $1,899,000 is the revised number of the run out. I haven't calculated the run out. When I say I haven't calculated, that's not a correct statement. I do not have that with me. It's probably half that.
For the town side?
For the town side.
Okay, could you
get less than half that.
Could you get us the town side? Because what I'm not seeing in any of my paperwork now is basically a consolidated internal service fund positioning as of June 2017 with the changes in there. I have several pieces, but I have several documents, but I'd like to look at one document that includes, I'm sure it's out there somewhere, but includes the changes that have been reflected and where we would be.
Yeah, the 2000s, yeah, we really haven't completed a 2017. In fact, we're just in discussions today with the auditors, because the Board of Ed medical is no longer in the Internal Service Fund. So what you'll see is what you're used to seeing is 3 columns.
Yep.
The risk management, the town medical, the Board of Ed medical. The documents you'll get will just have 2 columns.
Yeah, that was another concern I had when I saw us adjusting the June 2017 BOE medical. I was under the assumption of what you just said, that under 2.0 I shouldn't have a column.
You won't.
Right, so why did we adjust the money?
Well, maybe I don't understand your question.
That adjustment that I saw come through the Board of Finance seemed to hit that BOE medical, correct?
Yes.
If
it hits BOE medical on the BOE budget.
Okay, if we go to the 2.0, I didn't understand why we would need the reserve for that.
We don't need a reserve for the 2.0. We have what we will be paying in 2017 is 1 full year's of a premium plus the extra $2 million of run out of 2016.
So there's excess of 216 going through there.
Correct. It's called incurred but not reported.
Yes.
The people have been.
So that's the tail end of that's going to hit the 17 budget.
Correct.
Okay, that I understand. You put together some sort of schedule just reflecting everything that has been discussed to date?
Correct. Will do.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bob, just to dovetail on what Ed just requested, I hadn't assumed we'd get into this until Thursday night, but since we are, I was curious when I heard that runoff down to 93K, by the end of the following fiscal year, and that's based on what run rate? How many months of a run rate is that based on?
It's about 8% of claims. It's based upon actual experience, and the estimate's based upon actual experience.
Actual experience based on how many?
But the 93,000 is not the run rate. The 93,000 is what they would have cash left over. And actually, it was 93 plus there was 250 up above that, so it was a total of whatever that adds up to.
Right,
343.
I got that, but 93 would be left based on at current course and speed, as I understand it. And that current course and speed is based on a run rate, presumably of a number of months. Is it 3 months, or how many months' experience is that?
No, I'm saying it's about 8%, so that's what, about a month, a little over a month.
Okay, you're going to give us a schedule on that too, that if you could.
It's based upon lag analysis. I don't know if you're familiar with what that is, but
I can stare at a paper and I can figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Representative Gerber.
Hey, Bob. How much cushion do you have in the IBNR or whatever you're going to keep in the reserves in case we have some adverse experience over the next few months?
No, the way it's falling out with all the current, one of the complexities in dealing with the Board of Ed, especially with the changed environment, was the Board of Ed reports their numbers on a cash basis. The town reports their numbers on an accrual basis. So, when you're working with the numbers, there's some, some possibility to get a little confused. But the way it's turned out with the entries, the the adjustments were made based upon the total, the total expected claims through, excuse me, let me rephrase that, based upon the cash balances of the anticipated claims that we're going to be running through, plus the premiums, minus the employee contributions, minus the town contribution to the Board of Ed. And where we ended up, assuming everything falls out as anticipated and estimated at this time, there will be some utilization of the internal service fund, so there's no cushion.
So there's no, what?
There's no cushion.
So there's no cushion. So we've had some good experience over the last few months, which allowed you to use the 8%, right? Or Aon to use whatever percentage they used in order to come up with.
Basically, the $1,980,000 IBNR was based upon the formal calculation that was completed based upon the final claims through November, and that has not been fully reevaluated. It's basically been adjusted based upon the change in experience rather than doing a complete, but it's
Right.
close.
So between now and the end of the year, or over the next few months, if we have some bad experience, they could recalculate that and end up.
Well, if you have bad experience, we have to pay the bills, and it uses up more of the internal service fund.
That means we'll have less to credit against. We're using that money against next year's budget, right? So
some of the
release
internal
of that
service
money.
fund will be used to pay the Board of Ed claims,
Right.
if everything runs out the way it's currently estimated.
Right, and if it doesn't, the Board of Ed will be short. I think you have some cushion in there, right? A few $100,000 or something of cushion, just in case the claims.
There's a difference between the cash and the accrual. So,
I'm not with you.
basically the Board of Ed has $3 million some odd dollars in cash in that account. It's not really cash, it's equity. There's no cash sitting there, okay? But they have an equity going into, based upon the last month's experience, which we used which was February. They have X number of dollars of cash that's projected, okay? So when you build the Board of Ed budget, it's got the dollars that come from the town, the dollars that come from the employees for their contribution, okay? And then it's got the premium that goes out to the state for next year, and it's got the run out of the current plan, okay? And the dollars coming in, okay, from the town and the employees is less than the dollars going out. And what you use is that beginning balance, that equity. And that equity consists of basically what should cover the run out. And if you use more or less of that, then you go into or build up your internal service fund.
If you use more than it, we're going to have to find the money
Well, then it
for
comes
the
out
Board of Ed
internal-
budget from somewhere else.
Comes
right?
out internal service fund.
Okay, I got it. So if things go as planned, and we release our IBNR, do the employees see like a reduced contribution amount for next year's their contribution to next year's premiums? Or is that money used elsewhere in the
The employee contributions are based upon the CBAs, the collective bargaining agreements, and the collective bargaining agreements call for the contributions. It's called co-premium, cost share, are based upon the estimate going into the year. So if the experience is worse than anticipated, the employees don't pay more, and if the experience is less than anticipated, the employees do not get a refund.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Yeah, one sec. Oh, do you need a mic? Representative Bateson.
Yeah, one more. Bob, in looking at these schedules and coming up to this close of the year end, am I still under the assumption that on the town side, we're doing good for medical? I thought we had several million set aside on the town side.
I don't know what you mean by several million set aside on
I'm
the
just
town
looking
side.
at a schedule. It says internal service fund, and it has projected fund balance for July
yes.
16 of $5 million for town.
Yeah, the town side has been doing very well recently. Correct statement. Yeah, the risk, as I mentioned earlier, the insurance service fund is made up of the risk management accounts, the town active, and the BOE medical accounts. The negative has been in the risk management side in the workers' comp, and that's been offset the last several years, last couple of years, by some favorable experience on the town side.
Okay, all right. And we still approach the medical on a consolidated basis when it comes to town and BOE, correct? When we look at these positions.
We still, they each have their own experience, but the insurance service fund is a
Correct.
combination. Correct. It's all one fund. Yes, the insurance service fund is all one fund.
Okay, and can I assume that when it comes to risk management, the big number there is workman's comp, and that is trending still favorable?
That is correct. That's why over the last 5 or 6 years, we've gone from a negative $7 million, a combination of things. We've gone from a negative $7 million net fund balance to a negative, I think it's about $1.2 million now.
Okay.
So it's improved by $6 million.
Okay, thank you. I'm good.
I think there's some confusion that there's a separate account for the Board of Education and that it's not one fund. I don't think people understand. I think there's confusion that the Board of Ed is told to fund one times IBNR or was in the past, and that goes into one bucket. It's not as if the Board of Ed sinks and the town lets them swim. It doesn't. The account doesn't work like that.
No,
correct?
that is correct. The internal service fund components is one area where the Board of Ed can go into deficit spending. So it has zero impact on operations.
Thank you. I think there was confusion there. Sure. No, a follow up on that? Yeah.
I think part of my confusion was it last year or the year before, when they had negative experience, the Board of Ed had to go and find much of it within its budget. So I didn't realize there was sort of an excess in the on the town side that could, that contributions that could make up a shortfall.
I have a question about 2.0. It's my understanding that you don't need to move, every single bargaining unit doesn't need to agree to move. You're able to, should the state take you, you could move if you wanted to and they accepted you one union at a time. Is that correct?
That is correct, with one caveat that if the whole town moves, then the state's required to take the whole town.
Right.
If only a portion of the town moves, then the state has the right to reject you.
Gotcha.
Because the state doesn't want to just have the towns
Right, they don't want to take our bad apples,
Right,
is
all
what
our
I
bad
was
apples, and we
told.
keep our good apples, right, exactly. That's
That
exactly
being
right.
said, is there any talk in setting the pace and leading by example and moving all the non-union employees over to 2.0 as you're negotiating this with the union bargaining units? Do you think that's something that you guys are getting ready to do? I mean, you don't have this CBA for non-union people, obviously.
We're talking about, I don't know, what, 24 people or something? Yes, I have no idea what the state would do with that.
Non-union people are just department heads and about 6 other people, so it's not a big group.
Right, but as you're trying to work with the negotiate over with the unions and telling them that this is a bigger, better plan that saves money for the town, is there any thought to moving the non-union people there and leading by example?
Yeah, like I said, that's we're talking about 30 people. I have no idea how the state would respond to that. The other thing is that, and maybe this is better for Mr. Tetro, but the department head benefit structure, as I understand it for years, has been that it reflects the PETA CBA.
Right, but they might
So-
reflect it, but that's an administrative thing.
Correct.
That's not a
Correct.
binding thing.
Yeah.
I actually do have a follow-up on that, and maybe Mr. Tetro can answer that along those lines, or maybe you can, I'm not sure. I know it came up at the Board of Selectmen level that the contribution for non-unions, while it may follow the PETA contract, it only does so administratively, and I know that's something the Board of Selectmen pledged to look at. Their current contribution is only between 11 and 13%. We have administrators on the Board of Ed side contributing 24% to medical contribution. I just wanted to know for the record if that's going to be examined. I believe Selectman Timniak raised that issue.
When that was raised, the Board of Selectmen did agree to come back to that later this year, but during the budget discussion, we basically agreed to come back, but didn't explore that further at that time because there were so many other items on our plate at the time.
All right, well, I would, just as a representative, ask you to actively pursue that and try and get those contribution rates up to more in line with at least where the administrators are at the Board of Ed side, which is contributing 24%.
One editorial for myself as the semi-interim HR person. In interviewing for purchasing director and the HR director and the IT director, one of the difficulties has been our level of benefits. I know they seem high to everyone here, but we've had some people we've talked with that have not accepted positions because of our level of benefits. So it's just another
I appreciate
piece of
that
information.
sentiment, Mr. Mayor. However, I've also asked the follow-up question of salary analysis and compensation and where we are and if we're underpaying and if perhaps maybe it makes more sense to be paying more on the salary line since we are trending to paying more on the benefit line. Have we done that? I'm assuming probably not because you don't have an HR director.
Well, tell me what you want.
I don't know. I haven't done an analysis.
No,
of
tell me what analysis you're looking for.
I'm
sorry.
looking for a market analysis on where we are salary-wise. If we need to come up on salary to make up for a lack of benefits.
We have reviewed the data from CCM. So when you talk about a market analysis, since pretty much every town that we compare ourselves still offers a pension program for their department heads and still, again, as you pointed out, has cost sharing on the medical benefit side in that 10 to 15% range. That's what the market is. So as we take away the pension and as we increase the medical benefits, two things happen. One, for the folks that don't want to take that risk, they're not moving. Right? So if you have a pension, you're not coming over here. So if we look at recent hires, there are certain people that would not be here today under the circumstances. Second, there is no guideline other than negotiation on how high you'd have to raise the salary. We can't look at Westport and say, hey, they're 25, 30% over where we are because they don't offer that. So there's not a market comparison in that sense. We will go back and compare as best we can and provide that information to you so you can see that. But we're braving or breaking new ground here, clearing new territory as we go through this. And there are some challenges because the other towns and cities, our market, if you will, is not where you're suggesting we go.
Gotcha. Well, then maybe we'll be the leaders on salary.
Yep.
Thank you.
But
Any other
as
questions?
one of the things you learn in the private sector is that you need competitive salaries and competitive benefit programs. In fact, if you look at typical private sector ads, they say competitive benefits offered. If we're not competitive, we will not get competitive people.
All right. Well, we have a lot of vacancies. I guess we'll see where we're going to go. Thank you. Any other questions on this? Representative Lee.
I have a question of a different nature. I see that our townside health insurance has gone down $800,000. I see that the Board of Finance added $220,000 back in. How is it that health insurance got less expensive when we're still self-insured for the town?
The experience from November through February was considerably favorable.
Okay, so
we update this as Pam, I think,
right.
asked the question.
Oh, I know. I've been to
Somebody asked the question
1,000 of
earlier.
these meetings, but
I'm sorry, what?
I've never seen a health insurance line go down, and it went down a bunch. I'm just concerned. My question is, are you comfortable that we have funded it sufficiently? I mean, yes, we have the...
Based upon the latest and best information we have, the answer is yes.
Okay. We'll see.
Any other
And
questions?
that changes monthly. It's a volatile account.
It does, and we'll have another set of numbers.
That's really my point.
We'll have another set of numbers before this body votes. Is that correct? When
That-
did the next set of numbers come out?
So when do you vote?
May 2nd.
Yeah, we'll have March.
So we'll have the March run rates then. Any other questions? Thank you. 2010 contingency. $129.
Thank you.
The actual line's on 130. Mr. Mayor, we have a lot of new members. Perhaps you could just tell them the bulk of what this contingency is made up of.
Contingency, thank you, I'll be happy to do that. Contingency is primarily, not primarily, it's made up of two items, primarily. There's that word. One item is the estimate, or a judgment estimate, if you will, of the amount that might be required to pay retroactive pay to union employees when their CBAs are negotiated beyond the expiration date of the last contract. And as you can see on page 130, the budget for fiscal year 16 was $3,185,000, whereas the budget for fiscal year 17 is $1,004,000, and the major reason for that decrease is the police and fire budgets, which were a couple of years expired, were settled, and so they're no longer part of the contingency. And then in addition to the labor retroactive pay contingency amount, there's a normal contingency for things like extra snowplow or major repairs to fire trucks, or just other things that aren't in the budget. And the Board of Finance goes into executive session and reviews the detail of the labor contracts and the amounts related thereto. I'm not sure that the executive that the executives of the RTM have done that. I think they've depended upon the evaluation of the Board of Finance, but I'm not certain about that.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions on contingency? Representative Bateson.
Bob, are you at liberty to tell us what the normal contingency is in this number?
I think so.
Okay.
It's, I think it's $400,000.
Is that similar to last year?
Yes.
Okay, so then I can assume basically $1 million is left over for outstanding CBAs.
Right. There's also a part of contingency this year that's for salaries for new hires.
Normal contingency is in there is 450, and that should be the same as last year's.
450. This covers the 16-17 year. Are there a lot of labor agreements that, how should I say, are not negotiated for that time period? I thought we were in pretty good shape on CBAs right now. At this time period, police and fire are the big ones. Is DPW in here?
DPW.
That's got to be a big one. So that's one of
ECC.
So I'm going to say there's probably
Nurses.
1 year or 2 years of DPW in here.
And middle managers. I think 1 year.
1 year? Okay, thank you.
Linda would have corrected me if I was wrong.
How many fingers was that, Linda? 3. So I have 3 years of what CBA in there? 3 years of DPW. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, can I ask how close we are to the DPW, Mike? Has that been expired for a while?
I believe it's been expired for 1 or 2 years now.
Okay, so we're going to, by the time we get to a settlement on that, it's probably going to be 2 years, if not 3 retro.
Yeah, what happens with this is that each year we put in the amount for that year. Then if it's not settled, that goes into a balance sheet reserve account. So that saves up. So we make sure that we don't run, short in this.
Okay,
account.
so I have 1 year
So
of
when
DPW.
we settle police and fire, they had a couple years for each unit in there.
Got you. So in this number, I have 1 year salary DPW in here, and there's probably 2 in a reserve account.
Yeah, it gets cumulative because you've got, I think you went through that analysis last year. But so this year's either covers this year's settlement with using the reserve from past years if need be, or this becomes the amount that goes into that reserve account for next year.
Okay, Bob, can we get a Munis report year to date on this contingency account?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on contingency? Excellent, thank you. Any questions for our town clerk? Seeing none. All right, you're off the hook for right now, Mr. Mayor. Fair TV, I see Chairman. Hi, Jameson. McKay, thank you.
Good evening.
This is on page 85. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is a new account for us all, as you are now a new formed commission.
Very new account for us as well, yes.
You want to just run through the highlights for us, please?
Yeah, sure, thanks. We got started as a commission in August and have spent some time, I think, trying to understand the operations of Fair TV itself. I'm proud to say that I think we've made some accomplishments in a very short period of time. We made some upgrades to the technology, so people could now view them from their mobile devices or through live streaming as one example. We've also upgraded some equipment with some new cameras, some other technology, and we've started to make some inroads with members, with some community entities. I'm proud to say that we have some interns with Sacred Heart, for example, that are now starting to work with us. And these are hopefully some of the trends that you'll start to see from Fair TV moving forward. Some of our challenges to make Fair TV a more mature organization is to really assess assess the budget situation. You know, currently we have some funding from the town, some funding from a grant, and for Fair TV's history, we've been heavily reliant on the grant for the majority of our costs. What we're proposing, and we're working through a strategic plan today, is to start to diversify that funding, still using the grant, still working with the town, but also beginning to look at a third stream, which we're starting to identify through a private forum, whether that's through fundraising, looking at some grants, things of that nature, with really the intent to try to broaden and diversify the content that we're providing, continue to invest further in technology so we have better microphones than what we're using today. And that was a joke. No, a little bit of humor, very little with this group, I see. And really kind of having the financing that will sustain this mechanism in the long term to really kind of reach our goal, which is to be a really valuable service provider to this town by providing engaging and informative content. So we have asked for a moderate increase of around $9,000 from the town. We will continue to seek as much funding through the grant process as we possibly can, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Questions on Fair TV? Representative Bateson.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Quick thing, we're assuming no money from CAC this year, right?
We are factoring money. We're going through the grant process right now. I'm estimating about $20,000, but again, we're going through the process. Really, so the CAC funding is really intended for equipment, infrastructure, those things. We're trying to move more and more towards putting our labor costs, paying for those either through the town or through this additional revenue stream that we hope to start to generate. Historically, we've been paying for a lot of our labor through the CAC funding. We have to account for that with CAC, and it's truly intended for equipment purchases.
Okay, so I see your budget here is $59,000. And you're asking the town for $59,000. So if you got a CAC grant, that would be in addition to the $59,000.
Correct. Intended for things like equipment. One example, server purchase, a new server would cost somewhere around $10,000, maybe $12,000.
Okay, and when you haven't, it sounds like you're working on this third stream of funding. This third stream of funding, would the commission's intent be to offset the budget expenditure or expand what you offer?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question very much. So it is not easy for me to come to you today and ask for an increase. My hope is that we can diversify the funding of Fair TV through a variety of sources so we can become less reliant on the town in the long term. We don't have a strategic plan to share with you today, but my hope is between now and our next budget cycle, we can come forward with a plan that will present you a longer-term view in terms of how Fair TV seeks to be funding, and we hope that this will not be an upward trend and that we'll be coming back to you and seeking more money. We look at this as a one-time investment to help us get our house in order, to make the equipment purchases, start getting our personnel in shape so that we can begin to have a more sustainable entity in the long term.
That was a good answer. That was a good answer.
Really good answer.
You're
Thank
hired.
you. And we definitely are frustrated with microphones. So, anybody have any questions on Fair TV? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Appreciate the time.
Next up, Registrar of Voters, page 89. Mr. Arturi and Mr. Wagner, welcome. Big election year.
Very exciting.
Any highlights you think that the body should be aware of?
Any highlights? Not really.
Anybody have any questions for the registrars? I do on your overtime line. You have $5,500 allotted for secretarial overtime. What is the work week that has to carry over into overtime? Can you explain that?
What is the work week that has to carry over? Are you asking? It's
I
a
mean-
35-hour work week customarily. In a presidential year, you'll see a lot of post 5 p.m. work, required sessions in the evening, on the weekends, things of that nature. So.
And is that something that the secretary is required to be there for? That's not something that the registrars can pick up? That's not something that can be held and done between the hours of 8:30 and 4:30, Monday through Friday?
I guess as a general, and this is something that we see more of in a presidential year, we see, generally speaking, our secretary not able to handle other things than voter registration applications during the day. We'll see a volume of 250 or so each day in the presidential season. So anything else pertaining to the office has to be done essentially when we're not open to the public.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Zoning Board of Appeals, 1090, page 92.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Devoncheck, I'm assuming you're handling town planning and zoning as well.
Yes,
Thank you, sir. Anything the RTM should be aware of?
I'm requesting zero funds for the ZBA.
Good
And,
job.
Thank you. And for the TPZ budget, the 1.6 increase is essentially the budget for salary increases as to contracts.
Excellent. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Conservation. Mr. Carey, thank you for joining us.
For having me.
I did not make note of your budget page. 102, I'm told. 105. Any highlights you have for the body?
The only thing is I tried to put in as flat of a budget as possible. There was one thing, there was a carryover from last year for a part-time position that came out of contingency, and that's why you see the 5.47% increase rather than a 0.12% increase.
Excellent. Any questions on conservation? Representative McCarthy.
I seem to recall some discussion in the Board of Finance meeting about a wetlands compliance officer.
Yes, that position has been filled part-time, so that's why the increase, as I just noted, was up, instead of a relatively flat increase of 0.12%. Last year, during the budget cycle, they had waited for my recommendation to see if we needed to fill that part-time position, so that money was put into contingency. I made a decision to acquire that position, so in November that came in. We actually went out and hired a part-time person. We took that money out of contingency and put it in the budget. That's why you're actually seeing a little bit of an increase in this budget. So that person's working out well. It's helped to get down backlog of permit times and efficiencies at the counter. It's been working well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on conservation? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Community and Economic Development. Hello, Mr. Barnhart, you made it back. Thank you for joining us.
You'll be happy to know that 4 of the 5 teams I witnessed over at Fairfield U were receiving investment pitches, investor commitments for their pitches, which was very nice. So it's a great program.
Anything you want to hit as a highlight for the body?
Well, I would mention that we're currently in the process of developing a long-range economic development plan, which is focused on the needs of the business community, making sure that we're aligned with those in terms of the services that we provide. As part of that, we'll also be looking at a targeted industry study to determine types of businesses that would be a good fit for Fairfield in terms of business attraction. And so we're in the midst of that process, about to go out with a interview questionnaire that we posted online. We'll make sure that you all receive that that link that will go out not only to business leaders but also residents of town as well. So we're looking for everyone's feedback, and then from that we'll condense that information and then go to some actually facilitated workshops.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Barnhart? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, before we move on, I just want to, we have people sitting here, so I just want to run through this real quick. Does anybody have questions on purchasing? Seeing none. Administrative services? None. Finance? None. Fund balance? Yes, fund balance. Before Mr. Mayor comes up, anybody for the assessor? Nothing for the assessor. Debt service? Anyone for the tax collector? And then IT. Nobody for IT? IT, can you stay? They're hedging over here. Tax collector and tax assessor, you guys are good. If you want to go home. Sorry, I should have done that earlier. We're on 2020 fund balance.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Just very briefly, I didn't have the contingency folder with me when I was up here. The salaries, as we were talking about on the salary contingency, it's like X number of years of compounded salary. PETA has got 4 years worth in there, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Nurses, ECC, and DPW are 3 years, and department heads 1 year. So that's the number of years by union.
That's on the balance.
That's in your contingency.
In that number?
Yes.
In that number, 1 million?
In the balance sheet, and 1 million for the calculation for this year. Right, fund balance is
It's page 131.
I don't know. You all realize, of course, that I had to fly back here early this morning because you scheduled this today.
Yes, we don't feel bad for you that you were at the basketball game.
I had to
Thank
get up,
you,
I had
though,
to get up at
for doing that for
4
us.
o'clock this morning to catch a plane. But it was a great game yesterday. For those who were watching it, I didn't win any
Excellent.
money, and I was rooting for UNC.
Oh.
Go North Carolina!
Well, there you go. You were rooting for the wrong team. Now you got to sit before the RTM.
Wrong team.
Anyway, and I didn't bring a budget book with me.
Oh, 132.
If you increase over that. So for the second half, we keep it together. Yeah. A lot better, right?
So I had to come here straight from the airport. Anyway, continues, what page we're looking at? Country surface is 131.
132.
The budget amount there is $650,000. Excuse me, 550, 650 for 16, 550 for 17. Given the current budget as passed by the Board of Finance, that would increase our general fund balance as percentage expenditures from 5.84% to 8.67%. And if you remember, the Board of Finance policy is to get it up between 9 and 11%, keep it in that range, with a target for like 10%. Yeah. Target kind of being 10. I mean, the average of the AAA rated counties are around 10%.
And you said now you're at 8.67?
We're projected fiscal year 16 is 8.54, and this would move it up to 8.67, given the actions of the Board of Finance.
Great, thank you. Representative Bateson.
Thanks, Bob. Maybe Mike can address this too. This practice always concerns me. I understand the constraints and the parties that you guys have to answer to when it comes to the rating agencies and what they like to see. I don't mean to insult the process, but to me, this number always seems like window dressing to me, because the big number is always what gets generated from operations. At the end of the year, we'll get several $1 million of unspent money that drops into surplus. And that seems to be what's driving this number. And I appreciate the fact that we go through this exercise, but do we really need this exercise, or do we just do this to prove to outside parties that we take it seriously? Do you get where I'm coming from?
Yeah,
I understand, but it just seems like this is irrelevant based upon what I've seen historically. I mean, last year we had several $1 million in surplus. After you made your adjustments, we had a couple of $1 million drop into the fund balance, and that's what's driving this percentage up. And if I apply that principle going out to 17, we'll be close to 10, 11%.
I'm just a couple of comments, and I'll turn to the First Selectman. You're exactly right in all your comments with respect to what's transpired historically. An interesting note on last year's budget versus actual expenses were pretty much on target. So revenues is where the surplus came in, and I think the idea here is that we are theoretically anticipating and attempting to pass a balanced budget. I mean, there are no budgeted surpluses except for this. So last year we got very fortunate on the revenue side, came in really close, surprisingly close actually on the expense side, and so that's where we ended up.
Okay, I get that. But when it comes to government, I give you guys money, and all of a sudden it's just, hey, great year, a lot of money left over. On principle, when you guys get the money, like I'm giving you this $550,000 for this purpose, then we get several million favorable revenue. Now you guys have a pile of money that you can do what you want. I see all those transfers out on the audit report, $2-3 million transferred out to other things. I assume we need that stuff, but it just seems to be, fast and loose at the end when everything turns out great.
I think that's not quite an accurate characterization. I understand from the outside how it may look, but let's take a look. Let me look at two things. One, every one of those transactions out is covering a department change. You don't come in on budget on every single line item in every single department. So when we were $500,000 over last year on snow clearing, we had to move money to the appropriate place to cover that. So part of what you're referring to is those transactions. So they're not fast and loose. They're required by the auditors to show that we approve those, even if it's after the fact, and they're all approved by the Board of Finance as we go through. So if you have questions on any individual one of those transactions, happy to sit down and review that to show you why that's the case and why that took place. So I don't want you thinking it's fast and loose or out of control. It's very much in control, and it's much more in control than just saying, hey, we finished in the black, let's not worry about any of the details. However, you have to look at it, how the individual surplus occurred, because we do try and put together a conservative budget. So when we take a look at that, and I think I'm going to go back 2 years because I remember those numbers off the top of my head, and I don't have last year's, but we can do that for any year that you want to see a more detailed analysis. But 2 years ago, I think the number was 3.5 million. Now that sounds like a lot. However, 2.5 million of that was on the revenue side. We came in high on conveyance tax, we came in high on building permits, and we came in high on state aid that helped drive that. Now, we don't expect to come in high on state aid anytime in the near future, but we did that year. So 2.5 million of the 3.5 was overages on revenue. So when we talk about being conservative, we're conservative on our collection rate, and I think last year we actually had an overage on some of our tax revenues coming in. We're conservative on how we estimate aid from the state, and you want us to be. You don't want us getting in a hole because we, overestimated the kind of aid we get from the state, and we know that how reliable the state is in terms of what they're giving us back. The other million, 500,000 of that was part of the planned surplus, this contribution to surplus. So that was our planned item. Because we were still trying to get our surplus number, our retained earnings, if you will, up to a level that the rating agencies were comfortable with, because that's still one of the knocks on that. And so that means on almost a $290 million budget, we came within 500,000 on our expense side. That's virtually coming in right on. Right? And it wouldn't take much one way or the other. Take a look at what happened. The Board of Ed has some swings of 1.5 million on special ed that they were able to cover so that we didn't have to dip into that and help them out in that regard. So there are some larger expenses that we've been fortunate with in terms of being able to manage within that we're not counting on. So the issue is what you can plan on.
I can see where you're coming from. I'm looking, you're right. You're looking at the $300 million budget, and I'm looking at the $3 million number. You have a greater concern there. You sold me on that aspect of it, because you've got to worry about the $300 million. All I'm seeing is what's left over.
Here's the deal.
And I get that.
Yeah. If the UConn women win tonight by 40 points, everyone would say, yeah, they've been doing it all year, what the heck. But going into the game, you can't plan on them winning by 40 points. After the game, it's a lot easier looking back on that and saying, yes, they hit, what were we worried about?
I get concerned when I...
And the game is starting.
Whether this is, when it comes to these numbers, this scenario can easily get away from us. Not easily get away from us. When we have a good year, this number can pop. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but that tells me that you're taking too much of my money.
It's popped about as much as it could, and if we could, Ed, I'd be happy to estimate those numbers lower. The question becomes, what risk are you taking and where? So, given how we're trying to manage everything
Mike,
else,
that's something we're never... Me being on this side of the table and you being on that side of the table, we'll probably never agree on it, but my feeling is I just want to see us be more aggressive. When you sit down with who you have to answer to, the rating agencies, and say, hey, look, guys, my pensions are great. This is great. Back off on these numbers. Okay? We're doing great. And that's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, and to a certain degree, that's exactly what we did. That's how we got rid of the negative outlook. That's how we are, in good
Right. And I
standing now.
appreciate that the numbers come down from 650 to 550, and I would hope to see that trend and eventually to see this contribution to surplus go away.
Well, actually, it could do one of two things. It could potentially go away based on the guidelines with the Board of Finance. Typically, that number will relate to how much our budget's going up, to make sure that we do no harm, as the Board of Finance is prone to say, in terms of hurting where our surplus stands. We had a number of years that, if you go back to 2001, our surplus was at 8%. When I got on the Board of Finance in 2005-ish, it was at 3.5%. So we don't finish in the black every year. We're taking great pains to do that, and we've certainly done that over a very tough economy in the last few years. So we're working very hard to make sure we hit these numbers. We're looking now, and when we go into this year, just so everybody's clear, our Department of Motor Vehicles at the state level has really messed up for Fairfield as well as other towns, and we're looking at a $300,000 or $400,000, potentially a $300,000 or $400,000 hit on revenues from DMV. Now, we don't know what the answer is. The state promised to get us an answer shortly after we vote, as you'd expect. We're not sure what the state still has to come up with close to $1 billion next year. They have said municipal aid is on the table. They have not told us how much or where, but it makes sense. The state doesn't have enough revenue to cover their expenses, so they're going to have to do some adjustments. We're expecting we'll get hit here. And we also have, every year as we go into this, we also have adjustments due to Board of Assessment appeals in terms of what takes place there, in terms of reductions to the grand list that they go through. So those are all things that we, as much as we try and keep this tight, there's certain unknowns at every year. Normally, we don't know the state aid, but it's less of an issue. The state problems are just way too well publicized, so everybody knows that we're looking for a hit of some sort. I just don't know how to measure it or...
I'm good. I just like to, these numbers, I'd like to keep their feet close to the fire. So thank you for entertaining me tonight.
We'll work very hard on keeping our surplus.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on debt, sir? Oh, I'm sorry.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. I just want to follow up on the comment that Mike said and Representative Bateson said. 2 years ago, those work permits and all that surplus probably came on the backs of people who lost their home in Hurricane Sandy. And so for me to sit here and have you guys talk about it as a good year, it was not necessarily a good year that produced that money, which bumped our surplus up, as far as what I'm understanding from those numbers. So I just wanted to make that comment because it's very personal for me in District 9. Thank you.
Yes, Representative Gerber.
Hey, Mike. Bill Gerber, District 4. If we get to 11%, would it be, is the plan, the Board of Finance, that you've agreed with the Board of Finance to sort of spend it, to take the fund balance down and use that money in the operating budget the following year?
We're going to look at some different priorities, but the current priority as defined in the Board of Finance policy is to start looking at possibly transferring some of that into the internal service fund to work down the negative balance in our general liability and workers' comp silo, for lack of a better term.
So that would be once we get over 10%.
That would be one. It also may at some point, we've talked about considering using that to help put additional money into our OPEB fund, because that's our largest unfunded liability at this point.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Moderator. Before Bob leaves the table, can we go back to finance? Sure. If anyone's done with this subject, I don't know.
Does anybody have anything else on fund balance? Nope, seeing none. Representative Bateson.
Yeah, Bob, since you're there, I just want to revisit finance. In your budget meetings, something came up, I'm sure you remember, at the fire department when it basically seemed like they went through a reclassification scenario within their budget. You remember how new fire chief readjusted some numbers, and it basically came out that things were being misclassified. To put it politely, things were being paid out of different accounts. And I know the Board of Finance addressed this through, I'm sure you had an internal control thing. Have you taken, any path towards other department heads or issued a memo or done something to reinforce the classification, or that Munis, that you have a line item, you're supposed to stick to that line item? I assume there's internal controls, but when I heard that, and I know the Board of Finance heard that, you know, I'm sure that was an area of concern. I just want to make sure that the administration has picked up on that and sent something out to the department head, say, hey, look, guys, you know, paper means paper, you know, postage means postage, stuff like that.
Yeah, actually, when the fire chief made that comment, I think it extended the Board of Finance meeting for about an hour that evening. That was fun and games. But let me give you some background. A few years ago, when I took this position, every budget line item in every department had to be under budget. So, or else you had to go through a whole process to so if the budget was at $10 and you wanted to spend $10.10, you had to go through a whole process to spend that extra 10 cents. So rather than going through the process, what people did is they just started moving things around. So when I discovered this X number of years ago, one of the things that we did was we adjusted the budgets and held department meetings requesting that everybody use the correct line items, and we adjusted the roll-ups in the Munis system so that as long as you stayed within budget in your department, you could go over budget on a line item. All right, and then the intent of that change was to give people the incentive, or to take away the incentive to misclassify. So that's the background. So apparently that wasn't totally understood by everybody. What we did subsequent to that evening is held a town meeting with all department heads, explaining the rules, the background, what we want. We want everything to be accurately reflected. The other thing we did was we did an internal audit, 100% audit of the fire department, and sample audit of I think 8 or 10 other departments. And that might be wrong. It might not have been 8 or 10. It might have been 6 or 7 other departments randomly selected. And we found that the total, and then we issued this actually, we issued an audit report, and the total, as part of this package, I think that the total misclassified amount in the, if I can find that here, we also at that time, X number of years ago, we issued a new policy and procedures document, which we reissued, which basically tells people what to do. But I think we ended up in the, with the result of that audit, we found in the fire department $34,312 of misclassified items out of their budget of $970,000. And the sample expenditures for the other town departments, and I cannot tell you exactly how many. She probably sampled like 10 per department, 5 to 10 per department or something. And she did not note any other misclassifications.
Okay, that sounds good. When you said fire department, $900,000, you're excluding payroll, I assume? Fire department's not $900,000, not in this town.
Yes.
Okay, so it's 34,000 out of 9 million. Okay,
yes, 34,000 out of 9 million, including payroll, right?
Okay, thank you. All right, so it sounds like it sounds like whatever happened at the Board of Finance, you took some action on it.
Right.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. I just wanted to make sure that you reinforced, internal control policies with the department heads, and you did some sampling. So it sounds like you did the right thing. Thank you.
Right. And then we issued that report with the Board of Finance, so you probably all have it.
We do.
And that was issued on March 30th.
Right, everyone should have received that. It's in the backup materials.
And that is document number, as you know, we're numbering the documents, that's document number 25.
Any further questions on finance? Okay, any question on debt service? Last up, any questions on information technology? Dan, can you just come forward? Bob, could you just explain for the RTM, as a result of the RTM not bonding the servers, can you just provide clarification on what the plan is now?
The price of the server that was anticipated to be bonded was $125,000. The Board of Finance had issued, I guess, a bonding policy in 2011 that basically states you don't bond IT stuff, bottom line. So, and we also had anticipated acquiring 2 other servers via the same avenue, non-recurring capital, in fiscal year 2017, smaller, less expensive servers, more in the $70,000 to $75,000 range. So what we are doing is we're going to be buying the server, the one that we wanted to bond this year, out of the contingency account, and the $170,000 or $140,000, excuse me, dollars for the ones we wanted in fiscal year 2017 had been included in the operating budget for 2017.
Thank you. That's what I was seeking clarification on. Does anybody else have any other questions for IT? Representative McCarthy.
The town's IT usage, is it running roughly a flat rate, or is it seasonable to some extent?
It's roughly based upon last year's budget, where we've increased about 2.4%. So it's pretty much flat. There were some additions in there based upon the Board of Finance's insistence that we move our Backup and Disaster Recovery Center from the Fairfield Woods Library out of that basic site. So we actually found a third party to actually host that for us.
But I'm thinking here more along the lines of usage.
Usage has increased quite a bit.
Right. Does it fluctuate month to month, or is it light in the summer?
No, it's a pretty constant usage. You have to consider that the town IT involves all of public safety. So those are 24/7 installations that really do run 24/7. It's not just somebody just saying we're there 24/7. ECC is constantly open. There's a lot of data that actually flows through that. And basically the amount of storage and things that we've seen has actually is a little alarming actually at this point. The rate of growth that we've had in the town is a little bit more than I would have expected over a 3-year period.
Okay. What's the life you expect out of these servers?
The current versions that we're looking to purchase are, well, they should last at least in the neighborhood of 10 years. There is a, the storage industry has actually gone through a change. We're looking to actually move away from spinning disks, which are basically your general hard drives.
Flying around and spinning, I know.
Yep, we're going through we're looking at more of an all-flash array. One of the vendors actually gives us, will basically replace the head ends of the servers, basically the SAN disks, every 3 years on our maintenance contract. So essentially those flash arrays would run basically forever. That's basically how they actually sell it.
Yeah, I think I've heard that. Some supplier, I can't remember who, because of the concern about the finite number of times you can rewrite the flash, they decided to...
Actually, that's been proven to be false over time. Yes. If you check the recent Gartner and some of the technology, they'll show you that the flash doesn't actually slow down. It's the controllers, the technology that's actually running it. They can't handle it anymore. So when you
project flash over a 5 or 6 year period, it's really not the memory, because basically flash, all it is memory. Memory doesn't ever slow down. It's what can actually send the data to the memory that is actually slowing down, because all the instruction sets and everything else get larger.
I know that software sits over on it, so there.
Read-write has been proven to be pretty much good at this point.
10 years, so these are all servers.
This is again, yeah, this is basically just data storage, and it's really designed to run basically a virtual environment, and the virtual environment is going to equate to, in the next coming year, we're looking to actually put a pilot program out to run 100 virtual PCs plus our current virtual server environment, which is about 60 servers currently. So,
Thank you. I mean, my concern was if your usage fluctuated, it may be a situation where we would not be in the business of acquiring servers and disposing of them, rather renting them, on the cloud, I mean.
yeah, I actually, just so you know, as a matter of fact, I looked at that exact data this morning to approximate our current environment. We were looking about $70,000 a month as far as what we'd actually, if we wanted to basically migrate our data center just in Town Hall. That doesn't include actually public safety. Yeah, when you consider the amount of storage that we'd actually have, it's rather impressive. Roughly about $70,000 a month.
In cloud storage.
Yes, because it's not actually just the storage. You actually you're basically renting, when you talk about cloud storage, you're basically talking about taking your virtual model that you're running internally and actually making that same model out in the cloud. In order to do that, you're actually talking about virtualizing all the SQL databases. In our town, that's about 12 right now. When you start doing that, the cost of scale actually increases dramatically in the cloud. When you talk about this as an individual process for like an individual user, cloud storage tends to be very cheap. But when you're talking about it actually running applications, implementations, 24/7 access, things of that nature, it begins to be very, very expensive. And most of the cloud storage that you see for consumer base, they run on spinning disks. We would not look for that because we know there's an incidence with spinning disks that actually cause issues already. We would be looking for enterprise class storage is what we currently have in our data centers now. That is a lot more expensive.
Okay.
Any other questions on information technology? Seeing none, thank you very much. All right, that concludes the hearings for this evening. If you could all make sure that you get me your nameplates, I would appreciate it. If you all want to check in with your individual chairman to see if the committees need to meet, if you have any follow-up or items to discuss, you are all welcome to do that. We'll meet tomorrow. I did want to let you know. No, there's no motion to adjourn. Yeah. You guys, can I make a couple of announcements, please? Thank you. I just want to let you know that I received a message from Tom Conley from the building department, and he's unable to attend tomorrow night. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to email them to me, and I will get them to Tom. We will be back here tomorrow night again for 7 o'clock. I apologize for the seating if you weren't with your group. We're doing our best. It's a work in progress when we move around, so I'm sorry. And I do want to thank the Public Works Department for setting this all up for us. I also want to thank the Bigelow Center for hosting us this evening. And tomorrow we will hear Health and Welfare, Culture and Recreation, Public Safety, and Public Works. We will now enter into a recess and pick up again tomorrow. Thank you.
Are you satisfied?